One.
How's it going, guys? It's your boy, Lieutenant Dan, here along with Scott Karasik here on the Talking Dirty Birds podcast. I am so glad to be here with my fantastic co-host, who is on my right-hand side. How's it going, Scott?
It's going pretty good, man. How are you?
I am doing well. How has the week thus far treated you, and have you learned anything new, or what's been going on in Scott's world?
So, outside of work, which it's work, obviously,
Of course.
I bowled terribly on Monday night, which is, it happens.
Better than 100.
Not in any of the three games.
Oh no!
It was a rough week for me on with bowling.
No.
Couldn't get my hook to hook. Yeah, none of that fun stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah, one of those weeks. But on the bright side, I wrote a 5,000 word article about the Falcons offense just
There you
from
go.
researching and film and all sorts of stuff.
That's good. That's
And
good.
yeah, well, Arthur Smith has a very unique offense, and I had to figure out why he is the way he is
Of course.
with his scheme. And I narrowed it down to like 8 major tenets, and then each tenet has like 500 words about it.
That's crazy. That's good. Definitely. We'll definitely link that article out. And make sure that is retweeted from this, but also from all of our viewers and whatnot. Please make sure you go check that out. Check out this article that Scott has put up, because we definitely want you to see some of the major things that are not only coming out from a schematic perspective, but this was something that while Scott was actually writing this particular article, I've been listening to a particular podcast, that podcast being from The Athletic, called The Play Callers. And it's a discussion. If you like long podcasts and you like very intricate, it was a little messy, but it's in one way, it's a whirlwind of a million things happening at once.
Yep.
And in another way, it's also like detailing how a river works. And that is in its own right just an interesting insight into Kyle Shanahan and McDaniels and all of these dudes, Sean McVay and all these dudes that have been part of the system or been touched by that system or have copied that system to some degree. And so it's just interesting. I would just definitely go and take a listen to that, because it changed my viewpoints on even what Arthur Smith is currently doing, which
Yep.
You're going to have to go read Scott's article, because it details a lot of that.
So, one thing that I kind of researched when I was doing the article was how all the different guys, because I'm sure everybody's like, yeah, it's Arthur Smith's baby, but don't kid yourself in thinking that guys like Dave Ragone and TJ Yates and Justin Peele, and
Jordan Peele. What?
wrong Peele.
Yeah.
Justin Peele and Dwayne Ledford don't have input on this offense, because they all absolutely do. It's just, you can listen to that one aspect, that whole Shanahan style, that whole Shanahan philosophy, but all those guys are just different flavors of Mike Shanahan. And the Falcons offense, if you want a better understanding of it, you have to understand there's parts of Andy Reid's offense getting pulled into it. There's parts of, Doug Peterson offshoot of Andy Reid. There's part of, the Mike Munchak, Mike Malarkey, grind it out right up the middle, throw deep shots kind of parts of the offense. So there's a lot of different pieces. And then even TJ Yates, he worked under Kubiak as a quarterback. And then, he wound up with Cutter, and then just all sorts of different styles kind of blending together. And when you see it, you're like, it's going to be fun to watch. And it's going to look really simple on the surface, but it is not a simple offense in any way, shape, or form.
I think that goes without saying for all 32 offenses in the NFL, because it's not just a flavor of whether or not you follow one particular systematic tree or another different coaching tree. I think that also every league, every team in the league has in one way, shape, or form, regardless of whether or not they got a guy that was a defensive staff member or an offensive staff member or a front office member at the time that coaches at positional levels and things like that. All these guys have taken a flavor of the Shanahan stuff or the Kubiak stuff or the Sean Payton stuff the Bill Walsh style of football or Dan Reeves, or go further and further and further down. And you end up pulling and picking that it's not just copycat league in the NFL. I think that's lazy writing. I think that's lazy discussion if you really put it down. And specifically talking about the Atlanta Falcons, you're going to have a running focus because all teams have figured out that Kyle Shanahan figured out, that Mike Shanahan figured out, that these guys figured out from the past, that the run can be a way to make your deficiency at quarterback levied. You can use the running game to be a quarterback. You can turn your passing offense into those deep shots, those over the middle of the field plays. I like a couple of guys on Twitter are currently talking about right now in different sections about this is what the Atlanta Falcons offense has been building to, which is attacking that middle of the field and opening things up. Again, go definitely read Scott's article because you'll get a lot of detail and a lot of thought process. But like listening to NFL coaches go, it's about ego and it's about players and it's about timing and it's about how defenses have evolved since then, because we're not the same defense that we were before. It's about taking a defense of great minds and bringing them on their team and saying, you have a perfect foil to my offense. How can I evolve my offense based off of constantly playing you in practice over and over and over so that your defense also evolves and my offense evolves to be able to not be stopped by that. It's so many deep levels. And I like what the Falcons have done, if you want to use this as a transition into what we're talking about positionally. But I like what the Falcons have done to kind of circle Venn diagram almost of this is what the league does well and what's being copied and what's being used. This is at what we do well from an offensive line perspective, player to player, from a quarterback standpoint, from a positional player standpoint, and marrying those two things and going, this is the personal style that we're creating with a defense that knows how to stop this, and no one else has seen this, because you can say that it might be a flavor of something from the past, and everything is. Yeah. But this is different. We've changed something on this team to make it so that some part of the field that you won't have an answer to, it's going to be open based on our decision making and stuff. And I also like something that was said, and I'll give it back to you, Scott. But I like something that was said in this last podcast episode, which was, and we actually alluded to that in some degree, which was, it is the head coaches to make decisions and to be, blasphemed or praised based on what they do. But if you aren't taking the players into account, the human element, you can write up as many plays as you want and you can have crappy plays and those crappy plays will work. Mm-hmm. And you can write up amazing good plays that are flawless and they fail. But it's the players that end up being the make or break of everything that you do. And I think the coaching staff in Miami to some extent, and I think the players here in Atlanta and the coaching staff in Atlanta has decided to take that route too, which is it's the players that make the system. And we have a system we're going to run. It's going to be unique in what it does, but we have to have the right players, and we're going to surround guys that maybe you don't think are going to succeed, end up succeeding in this offense because it is the style that's built for those guys to succeed. The end.
Yeah. So when I was like writing up so it's like it still hasn't been fully edited and published yet, but
of course,
5,000 words is going to take them a minute. But when I was writing it up, I looked at it and I was like, well, Jonnu Smith is going to be used everywhere. And everybody's like, oh, well, he's just tight end number 2. No, he's going to be used everywhere. And it's like Mac Hollins, yeah, he's wide receiver number 2. Yeah, but he'll play the slot sometimes. Because
the
they
blocking
like to run.
comes in importance, right? Like there's
Yeah.
this wide receiving core isn't necessarily built to catch the ball and beat you. It's meant to catch the ball to move chains, and it's meant to find open seams in spots.
Yep.
But in that same vein, every single one of those guys can block. Every single one of those guys can actually
even little Scotty Miller.
Yep. Every single one of those guys can lay a hit on a guy and open something up.
So yeah, exactly. And
crazy.
Jumping into that, I'm going to bring up the wide receivers now. Just kind of pulling up. We'll make this a little bigger. Okay, let me hit control and not. There we go.
Please get Felipe Franks off my screen.
I wish I could. I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't.
No.
Wish I could. Felipe Franks is absolutely the worst. Oh, you mean quit highlighting him? Got it. We'll highlight Drake London.
Oh,
so just kind of, we're going to run through these guys a little bit quicker because I feel like we talked a lot about receivers even on the last pod. But obviously Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, those 3 guys in this, I don't know, what is it? We got 12 wide receivers on the roster. We got 6 tight ends. Out of these 18 guys, those are the 3 guys that are going to be featured out of this entire group. The rest of them, at best, are role players. Even Mac Hollins. Love Mac Hollins for what his role is going to be. But I'd be lying to you if I said that I didn't think he was only really going to play 40% of the snaps in the grand scheme of things. Because they're going to run 22 personnel out there a ton. And it's not going to be your traditional 22 personnel. It's going to be like, oh, yeah, we've got Cordero Patterson and, Bijan Robinson out here. Or we've got Tyler Algier and Cordero Patterson out here. And they'll throw Tyler Algier in the slot just to throw some teams off. And they'll throw him some, 10-yard digs just to see if he can do them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting group because this is a carbon copy. If you really did want to make a carbon copy of something that the San Francisco 49ers would put together, because this is a lot of guys they're all blockers to some extent. Yep. They have moderate speed. You're not looking at anything crazy on here. I mean, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Scotty Miller, Kyle Pitts,
burners. Josh Ali ran a 4.2.
This is made to attack the flats of the field. This is made to attack short areas, and this is made to create holes over the second, the 2/3 of the field or whatever that is, just like the very middle of the field, the medium part of the field, to create a huge yak. So this is not a passing game predicated style of offense on this grouping. This grouping here is going to receive a strange amount of touches. And it's
absolutely,
it's built strange too from that perspective as well, because you look at Harris and Malone and Blair and Darby and Josh and Slade Bolden and JJ Arcega-Whiteside, Penny Hart, and even Cordero Hodge. All of those guys,
they're competing for 2 spots.
But they're all the same.
I mean,
you can talk about height and
sizes, but
you can talk about height and weight, but
they're all basically the same guy. I'm with you.
The first 3 guys are the entire archetype of the rest of the entire roster. There's no other real differentiating skill sets in any of the guys that are currently on there, including JJ Arcega-Whiteside, to Drake, Mack, and Miller. Like that.
So I completely agree. So like your all around guys are basically Drake, Darby, Malone, Arcega Whiteside. Like those are your all around guys. Your possession guys are Hollins, Hodge, you know, Bolden, Blair, and Harris. Like your slots, you got, you know, Scotty Miller, Penny Hart, Josh Ali, you know, maybe Malone. Like there's not, you're right. There's three kinds of wide receivers. There's four of each kind, and that's basically it. And it looks like they're getting specialized roles when they're really just all the same dude.
Yeah, it's a bunch of the same guys to some extent, but I think that that's more or less not a, I don't think that's a detriment. I think that's actually an incredible positive for a guy like
Oh yeah,
Desmond Ritter, who is trying to create chemistry with his top form wide receivers. He already has that in Drake London, and I think to some extent it won't take too long for him to have some type of chemistry with Scotty Miller and Mac Hollins, since it's kind of just replacing two guys that you already had on the team. And even though Ritter didn't have incredible experience with anybody else on the wide receiving core, really outside of Drake London, if you want to talk about like impact.
true.
Everybody there is kind of a copy of those three dudes. And I think that's the same thing for your tight ends as well. You've got two dudes, Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and technically, to be honest, those are the same dude. I mean, Jonnu Smith is going to be more of your blocker, but Jonnu Smith is still incredibly athletically charged.
Oh, absolutely.
So you look at Parker and you look at Fitzpatrick and you look at Franks and Fisk and you go look at those guys and go, yeah, it's about the same.
So here's the thing. If I'm making a prediction on who's making this roster,
Yeah.
right, and I'm picking 5 wide receivers total and I'm picking 4 tight ends total, these are my 4 tight ends. Pitts, Smith, Hesse, Fitzpatrick. They drafted Fitzpatrick. He had great chemistry with Ritter in training camp last year, and then he got hurt.
Do you take Felipe Franks into consideration because of his familiarity on special teams?
Fitzpatrick can do what Franks does on special teams.
Right. And
you've got the best special teams coordinator in the league. So
I know that those are cons for Felipe Franks not making the roster, but why was Felipe Franks on the roster for these last couple of years? There were other players that obviously could have taken his position.
Honestly, he wasn't really that good on special teams to begin with either.
Correct. So there's a question I think everybody should not try to come up with an answer currently, but maybe sit and let that steep in their tea for a minute. What does Felipe Franks offer that Arthur Smith is willing to keep? If Felipe still is on the roster by the first game of the year, Scott, we will have to have a discussion on that tea steeping for a while of what is it that he offers?
Because from what I can see, at best, I would keep him on the practice squad just because he knows the offense at this point.
He's not
a
good.
Horrible blocker. Well, he's not a horrible blocker.
He's not a horrible blocker, but brings nothing.
He can't catch the ball.
Yeah, so what is it that Arthur Smith likes? I mean, it can't just be the blocking. Keith Smith can do that.
Yeah, I think it's like the packages where he can maybe come in at quarterback and run it, but like you've got Ritter now. You don't really need that.
You brought in Jonnu Smith, who is obviously replacing Pruitt.
Correct.
So this pushes Felipe Franks so far down the list.
It does.
Because Parker is going to make this roster. He's going to make this roster.
He's your best blocking tight end.
Yeah. Well, then you add Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith on that, and that literally makes.
And then you add John Fitzpatrick in there, who at Georgia made his bones blocking too.
Maybe that's the whole bit. Is if Fitzpatrick can show that he can catch the ball more on a regular basis. Not that he's not already a good player.
He's actually a solid receiver. When I went back and watched this film at Georgia, he had like 15 targets and caught 12 of them.
Yeah, but I'm saying we don't have to defend that. All we have to say is that if he can show that, then it literally puts Franks on the outside looking in. There's nothing that allows him to be able to make this roster.
I think Franks was going to be cut last year had Fitzpatrick not gotten hurt. I 100% feel that. Because there's body type wise, they're the same guy. Athleticism wise, they're the same guy. I just don't see why you would keep Franks over Fitz. I just don't.
Yeah. I look at that and I go, I could carry 4 tight ends.
Absolutely.
And be totally fine with it. But I could also see Arthur Smith go, all right, Jonnu's good. Parker's good. All right, we're going to keep, Fitzpatrick. And this was the discussion that I was going to bring into this particular pod now that it has flashed across my brain cells here. But I could see them saying, okay, technically, we are going to keep Jonnu, Parker, and Fitzpatrick as traditional actual tight ends. And we're going to take Kyle Pitts and say, yeah, maybe you're listed as a tight end on here, but Franks is going to make the roster because of something that he has, something he's been working on, something that Arthur Smith likes. And Kyle Pitts becomes that kind of like second or third wide receiver on this list, being that they're going to want to keep something going on with the tight ends. So I could see them moving Pitts over and then saying, you know what, Kyle, you're just not an inline blocking tight end. We can't pretend that this works. It's good, but you're literally Jimmy Graham before Jimmy Graham was learning how to really put blocking down the field. And he still isn't that guy, and he never has been that guy. He's always been pass catcher guy. So
but Jimmy Graham didn't want to block. Kyle Pitts at least shows effort in blocking. Shows a lot of effort in blocking.
Well, absolutely. And I think that he still will block. But I think that Kyle Pitts is going to be just a bigger wide receiving threat for them. And again, that's why I say that, okay, fine. He gets wide receiver 1 money. Buddy, like we'll still be quite a ways away from a London. And I don't think you're ever going to see Mac Hollins or Miller make money like that. And if you're paying Kyle Pitts in London your big money and you're ejecting Cordero Patterson, no shot at Cordero. We love you here. No shot.
No, but you can
age
find
is going to catch
younger
up.
guy.
You drafted B for a reason. You have Tyler Algier for a reason. You keep that together, and I think that Kyle Pitts might end up becoming your wide receiver 2. Yeah, he'll play tight end. Yes, he can do that. He's probably going to end up doing that a lot. But they're moving Kyle and London around is kind of like having 2 big tight ends. It really is. Look back to the Cooper Kupp stuff. How do you get Cooper Kupp open? Well, guess what?
Kind of relate it more to the Marcus Colston, Jimmy Graham situation, but I get what you're saying.
No, well, I'm just saying from this same kind of style that they're trying to implement.
Yeah.
How do you get your best guy open? Well, you put him in places that puts defenses at disadvantages. Cooper Kupp going into the slot or as a pretend inline tight end, and then with his speed and his route running ability coming out of that and catching something over the middle and making teams look silly is just the kind of Sean McVay, aka Arthur Smith, voodoo magic that you might end up seeing with Atlanta, because they are like, well, we have Kyle Pitts. I mean, the guy knows how to get open in the field. And Drake London also has this great rapport with Ritter. You're going to find the open space. Just how can we move them around in order to make our run game the most successful part, while Drake London and Kyle Pitts can find that open space when we need it?
So even last year, Kyle Pitts only played tight end, true inline tight end, 38% of the time. In my head, I was like, yeah, he probably plays inline about 40% of the time and then aligns elsewhere. So maybe that cuts that percentage with Jonnu Smith here down to 30. But he's still going to be big slot. He's still going to be, when they run full house in the backfield and they have the tight end in the backfield as well, he's still going to be in that kind of role. And you might have Kyle Pitts, Jonnu Smith, and then in the back you've got Algier with,
it's wild.
Patterson. out
The
wide.
things you
Like,
can do with this offense is wild
so
because
much.
you again, this only speaks to what we were talking about just a minute ago. Everybody's the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
Most, if not all, the players are the same. You can line up the same 5 players in different spots all over the field, and it completely changes the dynamic. You look like you're in a 22, and then you turn into an 11, and Kyle Pitts is standing outside, and you're like, I don't understand how this is possible. And they still end up running a running play that gashes you for 15. That's the kind of offense that this is turning out to be. And I love this particular roster because it's like I'm not upset if anyone doesn't make it or does make it. I know who the top guys are basically already anyway.
Yeah. I mean, Mac Hollins is going to have his snaps. Scotty Miller is going to have his role. Hodge, Hart, Whiteside, this whole group right here that I'm highlighting, this entire group.
Yep, you're right.
It's just who's the 2 best special teamers and blockers.
Yep.
Who's going to earn their role? You know, we could see Josh Ali earn the spot because, Avery Williams went down.
Yep.
They need a punt returner. Maybe Ali makes the spot and Hodge makes the spot because they're the 2 best special teamers. They're both willing blockers. Hodge and Hollins aren't really that different, except Hollins. Now, this is where I'm going to come in and say Ritter's pretty used to throwing to a guy like Mac Hollins because he threw to Michael Pruitt.
Yeah.
As receivers, they're not that different. And honestly, that's a good thing.
Doesn't that play into, and I'm just going to let you finish, but like, doesn't that play into what does our quarterback do the best? And how can we surround him with guys that do well and still works with our system? Still, the main directive is this, and then we sprinkle all this stuff in here, and it's like, yeah, this completely works because he's familiar with this.
And that's where, when you look into it, the Falcons want to play a bit of bully ball, a bit of, I'm going to run you over, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Yep. Whether I'm a wide receiver, whether I'm a tight end, whether I'm a running back, I'm going to run straight through you. You're going to miss 2 tackles on me, and I'm going to gain an extra 5-6 yards because I'm going to bully your ass. That is how the Falcons are going to run this offense. And as much as you don't want to say like, oh, this is what my quarterback, this is what my quarterback really likes. It's also about that bully ball aspect. So you're right in that you're getting similar players to what he gets, but it's more than that. You want to build. You want to continually build around your guy. Also, I hate to say it, money was a factor here. Hollins took a smaller contract. Hollins knows that his role isn't going to be as big in the offense as maybe it even was last year with the Raiders. He was coming to Atlanta because they were going to make him a wide receiver too.
But back up and then talk about a little bit with Jonnu Smith here, because Jonnu Smith was actually technically the first addition that we made, and it was in a trade with a 7th round pick attached to it. And
of course,
Arthur Smith's like, that's the guy. That's the guy. More or less Terry Fontenot. Let's get real deep into it. All right, here we go. Put on your tinfoil hats, everybody, because here we go.
Falcons had money to spend.
And Terry Fontenot said, this is where we're going to go with this. Arthur Smith goes, yep, that's exactly what I want. Every single bit of this played into what kind of system they're willing to run.
Yep.
That's going to be multiple.
Yep.
That's still going to have multiple aspects of the running game. It's not just going to be outside zone. These guys are going to run all over people. And they're going to utilize guys like Mac Hollins, Drake London, Jonnu Smith, Kyle Pitts, Scotty Miller to break you, to break your back. And it's going to not be fun to play the Atlanta Falcons because the Atlanta Falcons are going to go out and play such heavy football.
But as fans, we're going to absolutely love watching this offense.
I hope so. I hope we don't end up
barring injury, this offense is designed to run you into the ground and run play action 75% of the plays.
It's almost like University of Georgia.
It's almost very similar to what Monken was running over at UGA.
Very, very close.
But the run schemes are actually a hell of a lot better than what Monken was running. because
Absolutely.
you can get away with shit run schemes in college. You can't get away with shit run schemes in the pro. And yeah, it's not just outside zone, but they did run outside zone 55% of the time.
Yeah.
They ran an inside zone about 20% of the time. So 75% some sort of zone blocking. But they also ran counters, they ran traps, they ran man scheme, gap scheme, they ran all sorts of different things to create holes for whoever the back was. When Patterson was in, they actually ran a lot more man scheme to help him out. But when you had Algier or Avery Williams even in there, zone scheme is what they were running because that's what they did better. With Bijan Robinson, they're going to run a lot of zone scheme,
a lot of zone and a lot of counter because his counter stuff,
counter
going off to the right slightly, pulling blockers off to the left, and then him taking a sprint off to the left is some of his most dynamic plays at Texas.
Well, the outside zone's real simple because it's 3 reads. It's bang, boom, or bounce, right? So it's bang it back in, boom through the middle of the hole that you first see, or bounce it outside. So, I mean, Bijan for the outside zone is a perfect back because if he sees that cutback, he's taking it. This is where my Clinton Portis as a runner, like,
I love that. I love that comparison because
Portis loved to cut back.
Well, it speaks to what offense and where.
Yeah, exactly.
It's back in Washington again. It's
back in Washington or it's in Denver. I'm talking Portis in Denver even. Like
it's just good scheming football using a player that knows what they're doing in a particular scheme and not taking them outside of their comfort zone for no good reason. And that's what makes Arthur Smith so interesting as a coach because he's going, when we first saw Arthur Smith, it was run it this way and that was that. Now we go through a second season, this without Matt Ryan, and you go, we can't do that. We've changed the dynamic. We do have to run Mariota run plays, but for the most part, we've got to now do it based on the type of player that's in here. Not that we can't run multiple run styles off that one running back, but we'll play off their strengths. And like you were saying, Cordero Patterson gets in there and suddenly he's flying up the middle and he's got lead blockers in front of him that are smashing through and he's creating space. Whereas Algier and Avery Williams, you put them in and defenses aren't ready to go sideline to sideline 14 straight plays. And that's exactly what you end up doing. You bring up Caleb Huntley. This is an interesting one. Huntley, you saw inside zone concepts.
He was primarily outside zone concepts, which for a big back, you don't expect that. But then you also think of the old Alfred Morris thought process.
And the type of player that Caleb Huntley is also that same type of player to some extent of Derrick Henry, where it takes momentum, inertia to move that player. And once they're on that move, once they're on that swing, once you've given them gravity to sling them, they're unstoppable. They're very hard to bring down.
Because he's 235 pounds of just anger and hate.
Hate, and so much momentum that like the Apollo 18 rocket couldn't be stopped. like the moon is bearing down on you and it's gonna bowl you over.
Yeah, like you try to tackle Caleb Huntley after you've been pounded on all game by Robinson and Patterson and Algier. They're going to give Huntley 3 carries in the fourth quarter every game, and he's going to go off for 40 yards, and we're going to all be like, he should be starting. He should be starting. And I'm gonna be
maybe he should. Maybe he should, but we've got so much talent there that it doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to run Bijan 30 times a game because you got Algier. You don't have to run Algier 20 times a game because you got Patterson. You don't have to run Patterson 15 times a game because you got Huntley. You could keep going down this rabbit hole, and it's just like that with the wide receivers and the tight ends. You don't have to overdo Mac Hollins or Scotty Miller or Kadarius Hodge because you got Pitts. You don't have to overdo Pitts because you got Jonnu Smith and you've got Drake London, Mac Hollins. You can keep playing this game all the way down.
And with the way that Arthur Smith uses his varied personnel packages all throughout, which this is actually something I didn't even cover in the article, He varies his personnel packages play by play. He is always substituting 2 to 3 guys every single play to give a different look. And the reason why he does that is to throw off the defense.
Yep. Yeah. It was something actually that was said in that podcast that was Kyle Shanahan continued to invent, and Kyle speaking in that podcast actually was like, I continue to invent and I stopped doing things that were just to do it for the sake of doing it versus going, yeah, we have a scheme. And like my players are bound to that scheme, but I have to invent new running ways and new motions because if I don't, I'm just the same flavor and somebody's going to get bored and they're going to stop me from doing it. So I can run because I have 90,000 running concepts. And as a team, because of our diverse running tree and the diverse players that can run in it, we can do any run we want to. Whereas Sean McVay, in a different light, was like, I can't do all those running concepts. Not that we can't run, but I rely a lot on my players to come up with concepts because the players themselves see how to adapt off my passing. My passing will be X. I know how to run, but my guys will tell me what's comfortable for them. Shanahan's saying it doesn't matter about how comfortable you are. We're going to create a system that you all fit pieces in. McVay's concept is we're going to fit pieces in
by comfort.
Inside the scheme based on comfort and comfortability on what we do. So we'll even trade off Jared Goff if we have to and go get the right quarterback that fits what we're trying to do, but it also changes how comfortable our wide receivers are and makes our game more deadly. Look at Arthur Smith and what he's creating here and what Terry Fontenot are creating here. They've created a complete ecosystem. And look at the offensive line. Let's move to offensive line actually for just a second here. Look at the offensive line. It's completely tailored to what they're going to core values run.
And you know what's crazy about this offensive line? 3 of the 5 starters were drafted by the previous regime.
Correct.
Were hand selected by the previous regime.
Absolutely.
To run a scheme that they were not suited for.
Correct. And now you take every single one of those guys.
And you put them in the right scheme.
Yeah, if you look at their draft cards, what they were good at and what they were not good at, and see who drafted them when, and now what they're currently running now. They almost wasted 4 years, 5 years of working to be NFL quality offensive linemen to run a scheme that finally works with them. Jake Matthews is running a scheme that works.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That's
McGarry
incredible.
Like an elite. Caleb McGarry is an elite run blocker. He's like the 3rd best run blocker in the league at tackle.
And now doesn't have to have the pressure of the pass blocking stuff because we're going to be running heavy play action. We're going to be running the motions that are going to take pressure off of him. And so that plays into, is it a running play? Is it a passing play? I guess the Falcons are going to dictate what you show because it all depends on whether or not they come out in a huddle or they come out with multiple motions and make you have to change your defensive look based on what we do.
Exactly. And that's where with the offensive line, I think 9 guys are pretty much guaranteed spots.
Matthew, McGarry, Lindstrom,
Mayfield,
Bergeron,
Lindstrom,
Gallman.
Those 4, Lindstrom, Bergeron, Hennessy, Schaffer, Dahlman, and I think Gwynn is guaranteed a spot as well. And this is why. Schaffer was drafted to be a long-term reserve at guard, at both guard spots, because he played both guard spots at Georgia. Hennessy has
on the final year of his contract.
Final year of his contract, but he can play center or guard on game days.
Right.
And if you're only keeping 7 active on game day, you're keeping Matthews, McGarry, Lindstrom, Bergeron, Dahlman, and Hennessy guaranteed. Those 6 guaranteed. I think Mayfield makes the roster on day 1. However, I could see a situation where the Falcons bring in a swing tackle on waivers like they did last year with Chuma Edoga and cut Mayfield and send Mayfield to the practice squad.
The offensive line, I think, is the one thing, like when I dabble with this team and talk about this team as a whole, is the one thing that I'm like, okay, I'm cool with the starters. Jake, Bergeron, okay, Dahlman, all right, Lindstrom, McGarry. But then I look at the backups and I go, well, okay, Hennessy, cool, but I'd rather not, you know? Mayfield, cool, but
I'd
okay,
rather not.
not actually cool. I actually don't want this at all. But then I
Mayfield
look
at
at
right tackle would be okay, I feel like.
okay, probably okay.
Serviceable for a game.
But then I look at Gwen.
I think Gwynn is a lot better than you might, but I went back and watched all 4 years of his games at South Carolina, and dude was mauling folks. And even though he's
Vrabel.
wasn't a center, like he plays like a center. Vrabel's not making the roster. Josh Miles not making the roster.
I don't
Barry
think
Wesley's
any
not
of
making
those
the
guys
roster.
are necessarily going to beat out anybody in front of him. And the only person that can be technically beaten now, unless Hennessy just has a really bad camp, I could see that. But
They
you
like him
know,
though.
taking weird things out of
Yeah,
the way. Obviously, I think Hennessy is going to be just fine to make this roster. Mayfield's probably, like you said, the only one that I could see somebody on this roster ending up to beat him 100%.
yeah.
And that would be such a wasted pick. Like that would just be pretty terrible.
But I'd be okay with that because it's saying, hey, we had COVID games to go off of. We screwed up by taking Mayfield. We moved on, and Tyler Vrabel earned a spot. Or much more likely, they're going to end up grabbing somebody who gets cut from another team.
Um, I could 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
You're going to keep
9.
9 offensive linemen on your roster, right? So you're going to keep four
So four
tackles,
so four tackles, 3
or
guards.
3 tackles, 4 guards, 2 centers. That's what they did last year.
They did 3 tackles, 4 guards, and 2 centers.
Yep.
But I
With
think that
Adobe.
was based on the fact that Mayfield was trying to be a guard for them,
Yep.
technically. So now what I would end up saying is you're going to end up carrying this is me. This is me personally, but I
Yeah.
think you'll end up probably carrying you might end up carrying 4 tackles, 3 guards, and 2 centers. With
Now,
Mayfield being on the roster only because he can play. He's like backup emergency 2A guard, but probably only to Lindstrom.
yep.
And a
And
backup to McGarry
yep.
with that as the coverage. And then I think that there's a chance that somebody has enough, excuse my French, enough of that ballsiness to them that ends up saying, this guy, we want to keep him close to the chest because we feel like this person's going to end up beating Mayfield and Mayfield will be out of our hair. I think Gwen could probably end up getting getting onto the roster, not only getting onto the roster, but I think also end up probably being the starting center down the road if he continues to develop. That's the only thing about Gwen. I think that's
I
really
don't
the only other offensive line thing that I have
I
to
don't
talk
think
about.
Gwynn's going to be the starting center, barring an injury to Dahlman. I think Dahlman's their guy.
I think Hennessy would slot into that role just because he's familiar
Yeah.
with it, and that's why Hennessy will make the roster because Hennessy will
Oh,
be there
absolutely.
as well as a left guard replacement.
If Bergeron gets hurt, yeah.
Yeah,
Honestly, I don't mind Hennessy at any of the front 3 guys as a game day 6th offensive lineman. Throw them at the end of the line or use them in between. If one of those guys on the inside gets hurt, use them on special teams. You're always going to keep 7 guys open on game day. You're going to have your swing tackle, and your guard center, and Hennessy's perfect for that game day guard center.
I think Hennessy is I would be more confident in the offensive line if you took the name Matt Hennessy, scrubbed it out, and said Andy Levitre on it instead. That's how weird this situation is that one more decent offensive lineman, like basically Matthew Bergeron level, round 2, round 3 offensive lineman. If that person was currently on the roster, I would feel much better. But right now, I feel like as long as the front 5 here, and it doesn't even really have to be front 5, it just has to be 4 guys, 4 starters stay healthy, which is very likely.
Very likely.
Then we're going to be okay. I think we're just going to be just fine. Dahlman gives you enough. Lindstrom's absolutely incredible. McGarry is just taking such great steps. And then on the other side,
and he's above average as a pass blocker now. He's not terrible as a pass blocker. He's above average. Absolutely. And as a play action pass blocker, he's one of the best in the league.
And that's going to be really great because as a play action guy, you're going to be protecting a part where the speed rushers will be coming after you. They've had this tape for quite some time. But if you play off of that, then you end up creating some very interesting play action passes where they overcommit a guy and open up a space somewhere where this team likes to dink and dunk into, which is that weird flat off to the right.
So the way I notice with the things I notice with McGarry when he's blocking, if he has to step backwards on his first step, he's half as good as if he has to step forward on his first step.
Right.
Which is why he's so good at play action and run blocking, because when he steps forward and he just engages with the guy, he does great. So I honestly think if they taught him how to pass block where he steps forward, engages, and knocks a dude on his butt right away, he'd be a much better pass blocker than he is now.
Almost like a left tackle instance.
Exactly.
Instead of falling back into the pocket, you end up going after somebody and putting hands on them first. Exactly. It can be bad for like a rip type move, but you're not going to see too many of those types of guys on this side of the conference anyway. A lot of those guys are swim move or power move guys.
Yep.
I mean, even the guys from Carolina are not rippers. They're not. They're clubbing. Clubbing happens a lot in the NFC. I see a lot of defensive ends from the NFC is club move is their big thing. But offensive lineman, I'm with you. 9 guys most likely end up making this roster. And it's probably just because they'll end up going, okay, like midway through the season or something like that. Okay, Jalen, we just found a replacement. We found somebody that we want to carry that we feel like we're in a good spot record-wise that Jalen, we don't really want to keep you around or
let's say
your services just
Alex
aren't
Leatherwood, right? Loses the job in Chicago. Maybe they bring him in to compete. Because they could be like, listen, we liked him coming out in the draft. Maybe he just hasn't been in the right system. And we made McGarry work. He's a first-round talent, Leatherwood. Honestly, he was a second-round talent, but
there's options. And I like all the options that we have available. Do you want to get into any? I mean, we're 48 minutes in here, but do you want to get into any defense at all? Do you want to touch on any of it, or at least just like say a piece about it?
I think defense we can wait till next week.
Okay, that sounds good. Specialists. Let's just go into our specialists here.
All 4 of them.
King Koo,
our young ho.
Our young ho. I've got him on my fantasy team. Do you have him on yours?
I haven't drafted yet.
Terrible.
I don't.
I'm in a dynasty league. I'm on a 18. Is it 18 dynasty league? 8 teams, and 8 team dynasty league, and we have deep rosters, and we have a rookie draft every NFL draft. So we are deep in players right now, and I do in fact have Koo on my roster. I actually have way too many Falcons on my roster. I have Koo, Pitts, London, Ritter, just ejected Patterson, Algier. Yeah, I almost traded half my roster for the number 1 pick to take Bijan, just because I was that driven to be able to take that for my dynasty league team.
I might take Bijan with my number 1 pick in my redraft leagues, and I'm team no running back in the first.
Yeah,
I'm team no
that
running back in the
changes.
first 3 rounds, honestly.
It changes when there's are you PPR?
PPR and bonus points for big plays.
Yep, Bijan, number 1.
Bijan.
Bijan, number 1. It's just too
PPR big play
simple.
bonus. Yeah, it's worth it.
If somebody says, "I'll give you Christian McCaffrey," you take Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody says, I'm going to give you, try to think of another running back that's in that same vein, because there aren't many. There really aren't a lot of running backs that are similar to that. If someone says, maybe this is a little
Derrick Henry, like prime Derrick Henry.
No.
Stat-wise.
No, I as a pass catcher. If somebody says Breece Hall,
I would probably take Breece Hall in like
it
the
might be
third
too
round.
early, but if somebody said, "I'll trade you Breece Hall," I'm taking Breece Hall because he's going to pass catch like nobody's business.
Exactly.
I think that's the same thing with Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker's a great running back, but his pass catching is something that he's building up in his repertoire that's kind of terrifying. So it's like, you want running backs like that, and this team has built that. Pinion, thoughts on Pinion?
Great punter, fantastic kickoff specialist.
Absolutely, I'd love to have his job.
Has chemistry with Youngway as arguably one of the better holders in the league. So the 3 things that he has to do as a punter in the NFL to keep his job, he's really consistent as a holder. He doesn't have. I went back and watched all the holds and stuff because I went back and watched all the kicks and all this because I was looking at these guys. The snaps are always good from McCullough. His snaps, he had like 1 bad snap compared to the rest of them. And it was like slightly at the waist versus up in the chest. And that was the only bad snap. Like, oh no. And it was on a punt to Pinion. And it was like the 3rd snap he ever snapped to Pinion. Yeah. I'm okay with that. You know, McCullough is reliable. He's good. He's a long snapper who does his job. Pinion is a punter. He's good. He kicks the shit out of the ball on kickoffs. He's above average on punts and distance, but he gives a lot of hang time. So overall, it evens out, and they get good field position because of it. Koo is one of the 3 most accurate kickers of all time. I mean, Falcon special teams unit is great. My only issue with this special teams unit is Matthew Trickett. They gave him number 31. I fucking hate that. That's William Andrews' number. It should not be on a fucking kicker. Even if the guy's getting cut, a kicker should not wear William Andrews' number. Period. Giving it to Bijan, I'm okay with. Giving it to Trickett, no thank you.
But you couldn't give 31 to Bijan. Bijan had to be a star number, and they went out of their way to ask for that number to be put 7 on Bijan. And
he asked for that number.
It's to sell tickets. It's literally, you only put 7 on Bijan because you sell tickets. You're the new Michael Vick. You're the next franchise guy. It's actually fantastic that Ritter doesn't have to have that particular extra bit on him to be like, oh, you're the one carrying that. What if the running back is the one that everybody's like, yay, woo, and the quarterback can just do his job?
Yeah,
like just do it.
Almost like in 2008 when Michael Turner was doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like in 2009 when Michael Turner was doing his job, and then Ryan was kind of starting to develop something here. And then 2010, Ryan broke out. I mean, the similarities between Ritter and Ryan are fantastic.
Yeah.
And very easy to see, from work ethic to how they anticipate the throws and the coverages, how they understand the scheme, how they how the guys at wide receiver basically asked for him to start at the bye. So I've been watching that quarterback show on Netflix, and Mariota gets benched and basically quits on the team.
Mm.
But when they show some of his throws, you're like, how did this guy start? And you started seeing the body language on the field around that time of Pitts and London just kind of like, man, this, one of those, this fucking guy. Like,
Yeah.
like,
I think that
get
also
him off the field.
that's the things you have to learn, right? Because Arthur Smith's not necessarily young. I mean,
He's like 43.
43.
For a coach in the NFL,
But think about that.
He's young.
He's having to make decisions, and this kind of ties back into the pod in itself, but like when you're making these decisions and you have an ego and you want to test things and you want to move things and you want to do things in a conservative manner to some degree, but also just be like, if I want to run the shit out of the ball, I'm going to run the shit out of the ball. You're going to take lumps with decisions that you make. And I think it's very important to go in real life situations, in real life study. If Arthur Smith is out here making decisions like, I believe that Marcus Mariota is my best chance to win because, and okay, fine, that blows your mind because it's so easy. But when you go out there, you go, this is the system I'm going to run. This is my system. Don't tell me how to run my system. I know my players. And towards the end of the year, finally going, I get that this is my system, but I had to learn that in order to be like, it's not just my system. It's the players around it that make this particular system work. And whether that's 13 games or 4 games with any particular player or quarterback or whatever, you're going to learn something.
Yep.
And if it took 13 games for you to learn that Marcus Mariota wasn't going to be your guy and Desmond Ridder wasn't ready to take that step yet, cool. I'm actually fine with it because you know what? It taught us a lot about what we needed, not what we wanted. What we wanted was winning. Well, what if we just kept winning? What if we had won those 1-point deficit games and then gone to the playoffs and gotten embarrassed? That wouldn't have helped anyone. Their psyche
would have been gone this year.
Yeah. So it would have made it worse because now there's a different pressure, a different setup. So I look at the Ridder situation. I look at how the team's built offensively because we've spent these episodes talking about the team on offense and special teams. And this is a group that any more additions to this group will actually put it into a realm of expectations because it will be so talented. If Arthur Smith has figured out how the talent...
I think they're already there. I think they have expectations. I think if they're not a top 10 offense this year, a lot of people are going to be disappointed. Now, I'm not saying top 10 yards or top 10,
right?
Something crazy. Top 10 scoring.
Right.
If they're not in the top 10 in scoring points, the offense's job, there would be questions.
Yeah. But I think you can quell that by saying, record-wise, if you're better than 7-9.
I mean, record-wise, if they're not winning 10 games this year, I don't know what.
Well, I think
either the defense
absolutely
fell apart, or
I think the Heat is unbearable if they can't get past that mark. But if you can win 9 to 10 games with this group and put up a good bit of points and show incredible progress, then it turns next year from, oh no, the sky is falling and everything's burning down and everything's terrible, to there was significant progress made to make this team actually good. Yeah. And we now can go into this next draft and next free agency period, which we're going to have a lot of money in anyway.
It's like $60 million.
Something. Man, I can't have 2 seasons of $60 to $80 million in cap space and not feel some sense of like enjoyment over it and be like, wow, this is crazy.
Well, the crazy part about it is there's going to be guys that they're going to want to re-sign. So realistically, we're talking 40 to 45 million.
That's still stupid money. That's
still a lot of money. Still a lot of money.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay AJ. Okay, you got to.
You pay AJ,
I don't
maybe
want
you
to.
pay Okuda.
I don't want to turn this into a bit because we're at the end of this episode. But let's just say, for instance, the Falcons end up paying quite a few guys.
Yeah.
You're still gonna have too much money. You're still gonna
Yeah.
actually technically have too much money to do anything. And there's a lot of factors like Okuda getting by, and we'll get to that point in a later episode. But
Oh, yeah.
offensively, just looking at it offensively, there's really just not a lot to pay here. You've got everything pretty much settled. I mean,
Everything's
not,
pretty much locked up.
I mean, it's
Your
good.
offensive line's locked in for the next 3 years.
I mean, yes and no, because you could go back to that well if you want to, or you can go get another veteran if you think that's going to end up being the thing that takes you over the edge. Like the Mack thing. You went and got Alex Mack because you thought it was going to take you over the edge. Well, it freaking did.
It did.
It did end up taking you over the edge.
But they also went and got Sanu, who I think made just as big of an impact, even though people at the time were like, oh, no, Sanu. I was like, they need a number 2. They don't have it. Roddy White retired. Like, who's it going to be?
It's well built and well put together when you're starting to get that stride. So I'm just looking at the Falcons right now going, I don't think that this next season, 2023, is going to be that bad.
Oh, I think it's going to be a great season, at least on offense.
And you're going to end up coming away from this season, for better or worse, going, this wasn't as bad as last year. And because it wasn't that bad as last year, I actually technically am not going to turn this into a season of expectations where I'm expecting them to blow, things out of the water, but that the progress was so significant, so jarring, that another draft and another free agency is just, it puts it over the top. It puts it to a point of, you know what? I don't expect us to win. I know we can win it. I know we can win it. There's
maybe not. See, here's the thing. Everybody gets all tied up in, we've got to win the Super Bowl, or the coach should be fired, or the staff should be cut. Deep playoff runs keeps a staff in their job.
Yeah.
Losing seasons kills the staff. Do you know what killed Mike Smith? 2 straight losing seasons. Do you know what killed Dan Quinn? Like 4 straight losing seasons. Deep playoff runs will keep your job for a minute.
Yeah.
So as long as you can get to the NFC title game or get to the Super Bowl every year, that's going to keep your job for a long time here in Atlanta. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I would at least prefer to have that expectation of, yeah, we're going to make the playoffs this year. We're going to be a good team. We're going to be fun to watch. We're going to have a good defense. Boom. Even if the Falcons just had a fun to watch offense and a good defense, maybe the offense is like 15th and about 15th in the league, but the defense is top 10. That I would love, a ball control, like solid enough in the passing game offense with a great defense. That's great for me too.
If they're in the bottom teens of everything, which I don't think they will be, I think they'll be much higher offensively and defensively. Let's say if they're in the bottom teens, they're in the 19, 17, 18 range in defense. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, that's more than enough to be able to get you in not only a potential
12-5
divisional win.
Yeah.
Number 1 in your division, but also potentially get you a really high ranking seed and put you in a spot where you're playing at home. And if you end up playing at home with a rookie quarterback, because he is a rookie quarterback, that is essentially the truth. Yeah. It's the truth. Go into the season, let him play. He turns out good. Defense plays well. You go out into the playoffs, win or lose. You go in and you play very well. You go into the next season going, you know what? Things aren't that bad. Things really aren't. And this is something we can build upon. So anyway, that was the Talking Dirty Birds podcast here, talking about the last of the offensive players. Any last thoughts that you have, Scott?
Other than I'm expecting a lot from this team. And after reviewing the offense and doing all the writing I did on the offense this past week, this is going to be a really, really good offense. And I see the vision that Arthur Smith has for it. and the artistic smash mouth, if you will, is going to be it's going to be a slam dunk. I think they're going to have a winning record, especially in the division, especially just overall. You know, they play the AFC South this year. They play the NFC North this year. Two divisions that aren't very good either. They could very well end up being a 12-win team. They could very, very easily end up being a 12-win team when all's said and done. If Ritter looks like the guy we think he is, like you and I think he is, he's going to be a fantastic quarterback, and he's going to end up putting up 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns, or 25 touchdowns, and limiting picks to like 11. That passing part right there, just adding that to the offense would take it over the top and make it a 12-win team, because that's what they were missing last year, was a consistent passing offense. And then one more thing I'm going to throw in here before we go. Third down, fourth down, key clutch situations, Desmond Ritter goes to another level. When it comes to quarterbacks in the NFL, there's a couple sites where they let you do a bar graph and a bar chart and all that, and statistical plots. Even though his volume was low, he was right up there with guys like Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers in third down, fourth down situations. Not saying he will be that good, but if he's that good in third and fourth down situations for the Falcons this year, that's a winning team.
Take it as you will as my closing statement, but there's a reason why Desmond Ritter, while he was in Cincinnati, was as good as he was. And regardless of whether or not you want to account it for this, that, and this conference or that conference, or games played, or this, that, and third,
football is football, man.
Undefeated at Cincinnati.
D1 football
undefeated
is D1 football.
Iron sharpens iron and steel sharpens steel. There is no other two sets about it.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Falcons have created something special here. I'm ready to watch it. I don't know about y'all, but I'm ready to watch it. I'm tired of discussing it, and we're only 3 pods in. I'm ready to see the actual boom, let's play. So we're getting very, very close to the training camps, which is going to be fun to talk about. Got to be training camp battles. There's going to be a lot of discussion. There's going to be a lot of good things coming out of that. We hope to see you real soon for the next podcast next week. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this was Scott and Dan here on the Talking Dirty Birds podcast. Make sure you check us out at Talking DB Pod on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, peace, hair grease, and rise up.